The story of modern Israel begins in the ashes of a fallen empire. For centuries, the land known as Palestine was a province within the vast Ottoman Empire, home to a diverse population of Arabs, both Muslim and Christian, and a small long-standing Jewish community. With the empire's collapse during World War I, the victorious powers, Britain and France, redrew the map of the Middle East. The League of Nations granted Britain a mandate to govern Palestine in 1922. This was not merely a colonial administration, it was a territory pregnant with the competing dreams of two peoples. Palestinian Arabs, watching neighboring lands become independent Arab states, nurtured hopes of their own national sovereignty on the land their families had inhabited for generations. Their identity was deeply rooted in the soil, the villages, and the cities of Palestine. Simultaneously, the Zionist movement, which had gained momentum in Europe during the late 19th century, saw the British mandate as a historic opportunity. For them, Palestine was the biblical land of Israel, the ancestral homeland from which Jews had been exiled nearly 2 millennia before. They sought to establish a modern Jewish state, a sanctuary for a people who had faced centuries of persecution. This aspiration received a powerful endorsement in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration. In this pivotal document, the British government declared its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while it also stipulated that nothing should be done to prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities. The declaration set the stage for a profound demographic and political transformation. The Balfour Declaration acted as a gateway, driven by Zionist ideals and increasingly by the terrifying rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. Jewish immigration to Palestine accelerated. The 1930s in particular saw a significant surge as Jews fled Nazi persecution in Germany and across the continent. This influx dramatically altered the demographic landscape and with it, the social and political atmosphere. Arab communities watched with growing alarm as Jewish settlements expanded, land was purchased, and separate Hebrew institutions, schools, hospitals, and political bodies were built. They feared that the promise of a national home for one people would inevitably lead to the dispossession of another. This was not a theoretical fear. It was a tangible anxiety felt in villages and cities across the land. The escalating friction was unavoidable. What one group saw as a national rebirth, the other experienced as an existential threat. The British authorities found themselves trapped in the middle of these irreconcilable ambitions, struggling to maintain order. Tensions frequently erupted into violence. Major Arab revolts, particularly the one from 1936 to 1939, demonstrated the depth of Palestinian opposition to the Zionist project and British rule. Jewish paramilitary groups, in turn, organized to defend their settlements and at times to retaliate. The land was no longer just a quiet Ottoman province, it had become a cauldron of competing nationalisms, where every acre purchased and every new immigrant arriving added more fuel to a fire that was quickly growing beyond anyone's control. By the end of World War II, the situation in Palestine had become untenable for Great Britain. The horrors of the Holocaust had created a wave of international sympathy for the Jewish people and an urgent refugee crisis, with hundreds of thousands of survivors seeking a safe haven. This intensified Zionist demands for unrestricted immigration and immediate statehood. At the same time, Arab nationalism was a potent force across the region, and Palestinian Arabs were more determined than ever to resist the creation of a Jewish state on their land. Exhausted by war, facing constant attacks from both Jewish underground militias and Arab rebels, and unable to forge a compromise, Britain announced its intention to terminate its mandate. In April 1947, it handed the intractable problem over to the newly formed United Nations. The United Nations established a special committee, UN SCOP, to investigate the matter and propose a solution. After months of hearings and fact-finding missions, the committee acknowledged the validity of both Jewish and Arab claims. It was clear that a single unified state accommodating both aspirations was impossible. Therefore, the majority of the committee recommended a dramatic and controversial solution: partition. The plan, formalized as UN General Assembly Resolution 181, called for dividing Palestine into two independent states, one Arab and one Jewish. The city of Jerusalem, sacred to all three Abrahamic faiths, was to be placed under a special international regime. The economic union of the two states was also proposed to ensure shared access to resources and infrastructure. The international community debated the proposal fiercely. Finally, on November 29, 1947, the General Assembly voted. The resolution passed with 33 nations in favor, 13 against, and 10 abstaining. For Jewish communities in Palestine and around the world, the news was met with jubilant celebration. It was seen as the culmination of a 2,000-year-old dream and the long, arduous work of the Zionist movement. David Ben-Gurion and the other leaders of the Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, formally accepted the plan. While they had hoped for more territory, including an undivided Jerusalem, they saw the resolution as a legitimate international mandate for the creation of their state. They immediately began to lay the groundwork for a provisional government. The reaction in the Arab world was one of unanimous and furious rejection. Palestinian Arab leaders, as well as the leaders of neighboring Arab states, viewed the partition plan as a grave injustice. They argued that the UN, an organization dominated by Western powers, had no right to give away a majority of their homeland to a minority population, many of whom were recent immigrants. They saw it as a betrayal of the principle of self-determination and a continuation of European colonialism under a new guise. They vowed to resist the implementation of the plan by any means necessary. The vote did not bring peace. Instead, it was the starting gun for a civil war, as fighting between Jewish and Arab militias erupted across Palestine almost immediately. The period between the UN partition vote and the end of the British mandate was marked by escalating chaos and bloodshed. As British forces began their withdrawal, they left a power vacuum that was filled by violence. Jewish and Arab militias battled for control of towns, villages, and strategic roads. On May 14, 1948, the day the last British soldiers departed, David Ben-Gurion stood before the Jewish People's Council in Tel Aviv and declared the establishment of the State of Israel. For the Jewish people, it was a moment of profound historical significance, a reclaiming of sovereignty in their ancestral land after millennia of exile. Within minutes, the United States extended de facto recognition, followed soon after by the Soviet Union. A new nation was born. The Declaration of Independence was also a declaration of war. The very next day, on May 15, 1948, regular armies from the neighboring Arab states of Egypt, Transjordan, now Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq invaded the new state of Israel. Their stated goal was to liberate Palestine and prevent the establishment of a Jewish state. The conflict that followed was a desperate and brutal struggle for survival. The nascent Israeli military, though outnumbered and outgunned at the outset, was highly organized and motivated. The invading Arab armies, despite their numerical superiority, were poorly coordinated and beset by internal rivalries. The war raged for over a year, with shifting front lines and heavy casualties on all sides. The outcome of the war reshaped the map of the region. The Israeli forces not only defended the territory allotted to them by the UN plan, but also captured significant additional land, including the western part of Jerusalem and the Galilee region. The armistice agreement signed in 1949 established new de facto borders, which would hold for nearly 2 decades. The land that the UN had designated for an Arab state was instead divided. The Kingdom of Transjordan annexed the West Bank and East Jerusalem, while Egypt took control of the small, densely populated Gaza Strip. The independent Palestinian Arab state envisioned by the UN never came into being. For the Palestinian Arab population, the war was a disaster of historic proportions, an event they came to call the Nakba, or the catastrophe. During the conflict, more than 700,000 Palestinians, over half of the Arab population of Mandate Palestine, fled or were expelled from their homes in the territory that became Israel. Hundreds of Arab villages were depopulated and subsequently destroyed. These refugees scattered into hastily constructed camps in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring Arab countries. A small minority of about 150,000 Arabs remained within Israel's new borders, becoming citizens of the Jewish state, but living for years under military administration, their lives forever changed. The 1949 armistice lines did not bring lasting peace. They simply marked the end of the first chapter of a long and bitter conflict. The war left behind a legacy of deep-seated animosity and a complex humanitarian crisis. The Palestinian refugee issue became a central and unresolved grievance, with generations born in camps still dreaming of returning to homes they had never seen. For Israelis, the War of Independence cemented a national identity forged in a struggle for survival, creating a permanent sense of vigilance. and the belief that military strength was essential for the nation's existence. The surrounding Arab nations refused to recognize Israel, perpetuating a state of belligerence that would lead to several more major wars in the decades to come. The years that followed saw the conflict evolve, but not diminish. The Six-Day War in 1967 resulted in Israel capturing the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Golan Heights, and Sinai Peninsula, placing the entire Palestinian population of the former Mandate territories under Israeli military occupation. This occupation, now lasting over half a century, has been the defining reality for millions of Palestinians. While peace treaties were eventually signed with Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994, the core conflict with the Palestinians has proven far more intractable. Efforts like the Oslo Accords in the 1990s offered a glimmer of hope for a two-state solution, but they ultimately faltered amidst violence, mistrust, and the continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories. Today, on August 6, 2025, the birth of Israel remains a deeply polarizing event in world history. For many, it is a story of national liberation and the fulfillment of a biblical promise, a thriving, democratic nation that rose from the ashes of the Holocaust. For others, it is a story of settler colonialism, dispossession, and ongoing occupation. These two narratives are not easily reconciled. They are lived realities for the millions of Jews and Arabs whose lives have been shaped by the events of 1948. The conflict continues to manifest in cycles of violence, political stalemate, and profound human suffering, particularly in places like the Gaza Strip, which has endured devastating wars and a crippling blockade. The search for a just and lasting peace remains one of the world's most enduring diplomatic challenges. The core issues, borders, the status of Jerusalem, the rights of refugees, and security for both peoples, are as contentious today as they were decades ago. The events surrounding Israel's creation are not merely a subject for historians. They are the living, breathing context for a conflict that continues to claim lives and shape the political landscape of the entire Middle East. Understanding how Israel became a country is essential to understanding why, more than 75 years later, the peoples of this land are still searching for a way to share it in peace.